Go on, something we've talked about a great deal, which is the use of masks in COVID. Do you know what? I'm starting to see them coming back. There are people walking down the street for no apparent reason wearing a mask.
And there's plenty of nudging, David. This week in all of the press every day, there have been all of these scare stories about the, the variant that, passes your own immunity, passes the vaccine immunity. Should we now be wearing masks? We're being nudged towards masks and possibly restrictions. We need to actually push back on this.
So this is really interesting. You sent this to me. It's a Cochrane database. They did a systematic review of all the data on masks. And this paper is absolutely extraordinary. And I'll just read the conclusions. There were no clear differences between the use of medical and surgical masks compared with N95 P2 respirators in healthcare workers when used in routine care to reduce respiratory viral infections. Hand hygiene is thought to be important, modestly reducing the burden of illness, but essentially what they're saying is masks don't work.
Masks don't work, we know this, but what they do, David, and I think this is the important thing, otherwise you get people saying, oh, what's the harm? What they do is damage people. Well, they control because they signal to people, this is scary, you should wear this, be part of our crew, as it were, but also they damage people. They're harmful to the deaf, to people who lip read, they're damaging to children's development, as we have now seen. I noticed very early on when I was wearing a mask doing an 8-week check that a baby would not smile at me until I took my mask down and smiled at it, because they mimic what they see. These are dangerous. For people that have been traumatised, they're damaging, and actually for teenagers who are just learning to flirt and to use facial expression in the way that they interact with people, absolutely damaging.
I'm trying to remember.
And they don't work.
No, they don't. So just explain to me, when you've got these scientific papers that essentially say masks don't work, why are we being nudged again, saying, oh, we're going to have to wear masks, we're going to have social distancing, all the stuff that basically destroyed this country and many other countries around the world?
So let's not forget, David, that how many masks are now in the ocean or landfill? Billions. There's a lot of money to be made in masks still. People are still buying masks. They're still on sale in all of our pharmacies. Money is being made hand over fist here. So there are people who want this because they're going to line their own pockets. There are people who want this because they love the control. They love pushing us to see how far we can go. There was a damning story this week from the Royal Society, which was absolutely nonsense, about how masks do work. And Christopher Dye, one of the authors, came from the WHO. So you just need to link it all together, and I'm afraid, say no. I want to see people's faces.
I do too. I do. And actually, communication isn't just about how we speak, it's non-verbal communication, isn't it, as well?
And we're humans, that's what humans do.
I know, absolutely. Let's talk about some medicine, which you and I like to do. This is a brilliant story. The male sex chromosome has been decoded for the first time. This is a massive breakthrough, actually. And it's thought it should shine a light on why some men are afflicted with certain conditions and giving new hope for treatments. So, obviously, women have 2 X chromosomes, men have 1 X, 1 Y.
Fact. Can we just put that out there?
That is a fact. Because there are 2 sexes, right? 2 sexes, men and women, and that's because you have different chromosomes. But what's really interesting, and I didn't know this, the human genome sequence was completed in 2003, so obviously mapping it all out, finding all the bases and making the maps of the DNA. But there were huge gaps left on the Y chromosome.
I didn't know this either, David.
I didn't know.
I was staggered when I read
So was I. And the reason for that, apparently, because it was full of complex repetitions of DNA that were harder to decipher. It's taken a team of more than 100 researchers from across the globe to fully decipher the genetic code on the Y chromosome. And this is super exciting because we are learning what the Y chromosome actually does.
Yes, and what we will learn as we get more information is why men get certain diseases, why they're more prone, for example, to heart disease earlier on in life than women. The answers to all of these questions, and when we have the answers to those questions, we can actually help people bypass those, avoid them, and treat them if they get them. And the reason I say bypass and avoid is there are, of course, always natural ways that you can actually keep yourself as healthy as possible. But having this information will help us do that. It's fantastic news, it really is.
It's brilliant. I love it. OK, let's move on and talk about another medical condition, and this is about Parkinson's disease. And there's a study showing that Parkinson's disease may start in the appendix, according to scientists. This study found that those people who had an appendectomy, where the appendix has been removed, and we should explain to people what the appendix is in a minute, they looked at 25,000 Parkinson's patients, and those that had had an appendectomy didn't get Parkinson's.
That's quite amazing.
And it goes back to something you and I have spoken about a great deal, which is actually a lot of disease is based around the gut.
The gut microbiome, really, really important. And again, a very small study, but really, really hopeful. Parkinson's is still a bit of a mystery, and I told you earlier when we were talking about this that men get Parkinson's twice as often as women. So is there a link to oestrogen or the lack of it? And this again is why sex chromosomes...
And of course it goes back to the Y chromosome, yes.
Yes. That's why sex chromosomes and sex is so important in healthcare, and why we must always know what somebody's sex is. True sex.